Welcome to Sobol Says for Parshas Vayeitzei. Today we will focus mostly on the bookends of the Parsha, of the beginning and the end, in order to glean some lessons. Candidly, we could just as well spend an entire class on just the first few psukim of the Parsha. There are very few Parshios that have a more famous beginning than this one, especially with the incredible amount of deep lessons and messages that all of the commentators tell us are embedded in these first few psukim. Right out of the gate, actually, even before we begin our description of the story, let's note a peculiarity in the second pasuk before we even begin to analyze aspects of it. So if you look at the second pasuk, it's page 144 for those of you who are playing along at home, and it says, so first, of course, the first pasuk says, Vayeitzei Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. He left Beersheva and he went to Haran. And then it says, Vayifka b'makom vayilen sham kiva shemesh vayikach me'avnei hamakom vayasem me'roshosav vayishkav b'makom hahu. So this is a very peculiar pasuk that's unusual with two aspects in particular. The first is the following. It says, Vayifka b'makom, and he encountered the place. We'll discuss what that means in a second. He encountered the place. It speaks of the place, but it doesn't tell us the name of the place. Then, and if it were supposed to be something that was not disclosed at any point, I could understand. But then if you turn to the next page, Pasuk 19, the Torah discloses the name of the place. Vayikra Shem hamakom hahu Beis El, V'ulam lu shama ir l'rishona. So the Torah tells us the name of the place. So if we are going to be told the name of the place, then why not just say it right at the outset? Instead of saying he came to the place, as a matter of fact, as we're going to notice in a second, it refers to it as the place a few times, doesn't tell us the name, and then 8 psukim later, it tells us the actual name. Why not just tell it to us right away? Torah knows we're going to find it out soon enough, that's for sure. And the second thing, speaking of the word makom, the place, not only doesn't it tell us the name of the place, but it's unusual because it says the word makom 3 times in that one pasuk. Again, a very seemingly poorly constructed pasuk. It could have been written much more efficiently. It says Vayifka b'makom. He encountered the makom. Vayilen sham. He slept there. Kiva shemesh, because the sun had set. Vayikach me'avnei hamakom. He took the rocks of the place. Vayaseh meroshosav. He put under his head. Vayishkav b'makom hahu. And he slept in that place. It could have just said that Yaakov encountered that place and he took the stones from there and slept there. It doesn't have to say the word makom 3 different times in that one pasuk. So we're going to return to this in a little while to see what we can extract from that. So now back to the actual Parsha itself. So as we all know, Yaakov famously sets forth on his journey away from home in Eretz Yisrael to the land of Lavan. He is, of course, fleeing Esav at this point, who would like to kill him. And he is also simultaneously in search of a mate to start a family, or should I say, the family. We're going to return to the significance of that in a short while as well. Anyway, there's an equally famous Rashi, also right out of the bat, on page 144 again, Pasuk 12. Or rather, pasuk 11, again, that first pasuk that we looked at, Vayasem me'roshosav, that he took from the rocks of that place and he put it under his head. This is a very famous Rashi, and it says on it, let's see, pasuk Yud Aleph, where are you? Vayasem me'roshosav. Asayin kimin rov saviv l'rosho sheyura b'mnei chayos raos. So first Rashi explains to us what was happening, that he took them, placed them in like a semicircle around his head in order to protect him from the wild animals, the bad animals. Hischilu merivos zu im zu, zos omeres alai yaniach tzadik es rosho, v'zos omeres alai yaniach, miyad ason HaKadosh Baruch Hu even achas, v'zeu shenemar v'yikach es even asher me rosho sav. Says Rashi, very famous Rashi, based on the Medrash, tells us that what happened. Yaakov sets a semicircle of 12 stones around his head. Each one starts arguing, I want the tzaddik to rest his head on me. I want it to rest his head on me. So immediately Hashem merges them into a single unit, a single rock. And therefore, Yaakov rested his head on all of them. What makes Rashi say such a thing? So he references the pasuk a few psukim later on page 146, pasuk 18. Why would Rashi suggest such a thing, or rather the Medrash? Because it says, "Vayashkem Yaakov baboker vayikaches ha'even asher samei rosho sav." Yaakov got up in the morning and he took the stone that he had placed around his head. We have a problem. Originally it says he took the stones, me'avnei hamakom, from the stones of the place and placed them under his head. Now, when he wakes up, it says he took the stone, only a singular one that was underneath his head. From there we see there's a problem, because originally it was many stones. Now it's only one stone. Therefore the Gemara, the Medrash rather, tells us that Rashi quotes that it all had merged into a single stone. So, the idea was, of course, it was 12 stones, and as we know, those were to represent the 12 Shvatim that would ultimately come from Yaakov, but they would ultimately merge into a single unit, a single nation through unity. That was the ultimate goal. But we're going to come back to that in a little while. But the idea of the rocks in the first place, okay, so we had said that he had placed them around his head in order to protect him from animals. Putting aside the fact that would just protect his head, not his body, but nonetheless we understand that metaphorically, that he was making a protection for his head specifically, because now his body, so to speak, was entering the real world, but at least his head should be protected. In other words, we oftentimes have to go out into what we'll say an atmosphere that is less than a classic Torah environment, and our body needs to take us there. But the idea is we need to protect our head. At least our head should be in the right place. We should be Yirei Shamayim, always remembering who we are and what our purpose is, and always acting properly accordingly. But coming back to the idea of the rocks coalescing into a single one, there's an obvious problem with that. Okay, it's a beautiful story. The rocks were all fighting. I want the tzaddik to lie on me. Great. Everyone melds into one. Very nice. Fine. But there's an obvious question on this. Who is now protecting Yaakov? If the whole point of the rocks was to protect him, and that's why he made a circle around his head, okay, it's a lovely story that they all wanted to have him lie on him, so they all got together. But now guess what? No one's protecting Yaakov. So who was doing it? Okay, great. What's the point? Or it sounds like they're missing the point. Because what is the purpose of making sure that the tzaddik lies on you? Because if he's not protected and something happens to him, then big deal that he lay his head on you, because ultimately your job of protecting him was not done. You know, if you're supposed to stand shmira somewhere and then you get all excited, you see a tzaddik and you want to go run over to him and give him kavod, but you left your post, that's an irresponsible thing to do. You shouldn't be doing that. If your job is to protect, then your job is to protect, regardless of your desire to give honor to the tzaddik. So we're going to come back to that as well. Now, an equally famous Rashi, I warned you there are a lot of them on just these first few psukim, discusses another aspect. Specifically, we are told by Rashi, coming back to that second pasuk again, that it says, Vayifga b'makom, that he encountered that place. So, of course, as we all know, Rashi tells us Vayifga. Kamo Amoria Shenamar Ufega B'Davar Rabosenu Pirshu Lashon Tefila. So Rashi tells us very famously, what is this odd terminology, Vayifga b'makom, that he encountered the place? Says Rashi, quoting different psukim, that the word fega is to teach us tefillah. It's a lashon of davening, and he goes on to explain that, and then he says, "V'lamadu shetikein tefillah arvis." So therefore, we learn from here that Yaakov had instituted the tefillah of Ma'ariv. So we can ask a couple of questions on this. The first is, why did Yaakov feel the need to institute another tefillah? As a general rule, you should know that the Avos did not innovate when they were in their father's home. So for so long as Avraham was the Av, then Yitzchak did not do any innovating on his own. That's why, if you saw in Parshas Toldos, in Parshas Vayera, that when Yitzchak meets Rivka for the first time, he was coming back from the field, having just instituted the tefillah of Mincha. That was around the time that his father was already out of the picture. As we know, the Torah actually says that Avram died at that time. We know he might have died a little bit longer, but he was out of the picture at that point, Avram. Now it was Yitzchak's turn. Therefore, that is when Yitzchak innovates the tefillah of Mincha. Similarly with Yaakov, now that he has left his father's home, he feels comfortable innovating a tefillah. The question is, what did he need to do that for in the first place? Was Shachris and Mincha not adequate enough that he felt he needed to institute a third tefillah? And the second question is, why right here, right now? Why is this the place? Why is this the moment? It's very clear. The Torah is telling us specifically at this moment, Yaakov institutes the tefillah of Ma'ariv. Why? Why did it have to be now? So to answer the first question, I'll share a little small Dvar Torah with you that my daughter Danielle sent to me quite a few years ago, that she had learned from her rabbi at the time, Rabbi Lerner, and he explained the following idea. That when Avram established the tefillah of Shachris, the sun was rising. At this time of day, there's a clarity of purpose and something to look forward to. The whole day is ahead. At Mincha time, there's a chance to reflect on how the day went, what you accomplished, and what you need to accomplish the next day. But Tefillas Ma'ariv is different from the other two. At this point in Yaakov's journey, he is transitioning from the safe cocoon of Torah learning at Yeshiva Shem Be'aver to a period of gullus in a faraway land for an indefinite period, during which he will encounter many challenges, including dealing with Lavan and finding a wife. He has no clue what the future will bring. It's Erev, darkness, a period of uncertainty. And that requires a different tefillah than that of Abraham and Yitzchak. And that's a very interesting understanding, because that is in fact what was happening with Yaakov. And I want to suggest it was precisely at the yeshiva of Shem Ve'aver that Yaakov learned the need to prepare himself for and protect himself from Golus. And that is why he felt the need for a different type of tefillah than that of his fathers. But we must still understand why precisely now that he innovates it, as opposed to another time. Why was it this moment? So as you may know, actually I have not done it on the video, but in past classes I have a very big chiddush that explains exactly that answer. We're not going to do it this year. I need some material for the future. Instead, we're going to go in a different direction with it. But we will come back to that soon. Then Yaakov travels to Lavan. He meets Rachel, and they have a very curious dialogue when they first meet. If you turn to page 148, Pasuk 12. So here, Rachel has now invited him to come back with her, and he says to her the following: Vayeged Yaakov l'Rachel, ki achi aviyahu, v'chi then Rivkahu, v'toratz v'taked lavia. So he says, please send this message to your father, that I am his relative, and that he's Rivka's son. Okay, seems like a straightforward pasuk. Except when we read Rashi, he tells us something very interesting. Why does he say, ki achi aviyahu, that I am your father's brother? Karov Lavia. So the Pashup shot, simple interpretation is that we are relatives, of course. Umidrasha. But the midrashic interpretation is im the Ramos hu ba gamani achiv Ramos vim adam kasher hu gamani ben Rivka achoso akshera. So he said, oh, and by the way, please send your father this message. If he's going to be the charlatan that I've heard he is, then I am his brother in trickery. If he wants to do some fraudulent activity, I'm going to be right there with him. But if he's going to treat me well, if he's going to be a kosher guy, just know I'm the son of Rivka's sister. I'm a kosher guy also. Now, if you think about it, what kind of intro is that to a prospective bride's father, right? Is that the opening statement that you want to have? Oh yeah, please go tell your father before we meet. By the way, if he's going to be a fraudster, I can be a fraudster too. That's not the best way to go into the relationship. So why did he say that? So the Tolner Rebbe offers a very interesting answer. He says that in fact, forget about that. In fact, Yaakov was swindled time and time again by Lavan, right? Lavan is constantly, it's a history of trickery that Lavan pulls on Yaakov, beginning with Rachel and substituting Leah for her instead, and throughout with the sheep, etc. He's always swindling Yaakov. So why did Yaakov even bother saying this to him in the first place? So he brings a Gemara in Baba Basra. I'm not going to go into the whole background. It's fairly complicated. But basically it's discussing different weights and measures and the halachas of them. And what is allowed and what is not allowed. And the Chachamim, it's actually Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in particular, is now going to teach a shir. He is going to give a community-wide discourse on legal and illegal weights and measures. But Rabban Yochanan has pause before he teaches the class. And the Gemara, it's in Bava Basra, as I said, tells us the following. I'm just going to read it in English for expediency. So regarding all of those tricks that somebody can use with the weights and measures, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said, woe to me if I teach them, and woe to me if I don't teach them. If I don't teach these tricks that you're not allowed to do and then tell the people not to do them. Woe to me if I say it, because the swindlers might learn from me how to cheat. And if I do not say it, the swindlers might say, oh, the rabbis are not familiar with our illegal activities. So, this was his choice. He's trying to decide to give the shir or not, because he's deciding the following. If I tell everybody all these tricks, so all the dishonest people are going to be like, that's a good idea. I actually always think about that, on shows like 24 or those other drama shows or those movies with terrorists, whatever. I'm always nervous because sometimes they have really clever ideas that they come up with in those movies for how to commit some act of terrorism. And I'm always thinking to myself like, maybe they should not be sharing these ideas, because there's going to be some yokel in Afghanistan who's watching this movie who's going to say to himself, that is clever. Let's try and implement that. And I always think to myself about that. Basically, that's what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's concern was. He was concerned that if he tells these people these tricks that could be done and that they should not be done, he's afraid he's going to teach the swindlers all these great tricks. But if he doesn't, he's afraid they're going to say, these rabbis don't know anything. They don't know the ways of the real world. Says the Tolner Rebbe, what Rabban Yochanan was saying is a foundational understanding of how to impact people. When we see someone is an expert in an area that we are as well, or perhaps even greater than us in that area, we respect them that much more. But when we think they're just a Rebbe, just a rabbi, they don't know the ways of the world. They're just with their little books and learning inside a pristine environment. They don't understand how things go. Then we say, what can they teach us? They don't understand. They don't understand the challenges we confront. They don't understand what it's like in the real world. So Rabban Yochanan wanted to show the swindlers that he knew their business. He knew. He was as smart as they were. He knew all the tricks. He could also deceive. And then perhaps by showing them that, because he does decide, in fact, the end of the Gemara is that he does give the share, then they would perhaps have derech eretz for him. They would respect him that much more, because now they see, he really does know where we're coming from. And then he may be able to influence them for the good. So too with Yaakov. He wanted Lavan, forget about what actually happened. He just wanted Lavan to understand that because he wanted to influence Lavan, right? So he wanted him to understand, I know the ways of the world also. I'm just like you. Now, it could be that Lavan was unteachable, but we see from there the importance of having broad knowledge, in addition to Torah, in order to be able to properly influence people. We're going to return to this as well. Okay, so let's recap. I don't know about you, but I'm getting old and I can't remember all the questions anymore. So let's just look at the things that we noted and then see if we can tie them all up and find a common theme. First was the unusual emphasis on the word makom in the first pasuk. And later, especially since later the Torah tells us the actual name of the place. So in fact, it must be sending us a different message by calling it makom. Why is it just referred to as makom here and we are not told the name of the place? And it's said 3 times, no less. The second is that Yaakov is clearly setting out to start the family, as is alluded to by his placing the 12 rocks around his head, representing the 12 shvatim he knew he would have. And then eventually they merge into a single rock in a display of unity. Where from that incident do we see that Yaakov now understood that in fact he was going to be the father of Bnei Yisrael, essentially, that he was going to father 12 tribes and that he would be in fact building the family? 3. Also, if the rocks were to surround Yaakov's head to protect him, then who was protecting Yaakov once they all merged into a single rock? Although it was a nice display of unity, it seems to leave Yaakov exposed. 4. Why does Yaakov institute the tefillah of Ma'ariv precisely at that moment? 5. Although Yaakov makes it clear he can be Lavan's brother in deceit, we suggest that he did so in order to gain Lavan's respect so he could influence him for the good. What can we learn from that? 6, at the end of the Parsha, and we didn't look inside, but at the end of the Parsha, Yaakov, after he's being chased by Lavan, makes a peace treaty with Lavan, and there the brothers, who are now all real people, there are 11 of them born at this point, they gather stones to make a monument, or a mound as they call it. But as opposed to the beginning of the Parsha, when Yaakov sets up 12 stones and they all meld into one, here the stones stay separate. Try saying that 3 times fast. The stones stay separate, they do not merge. What can we see from that? So now let us attempt to answer all of the above. Although the answer will not necessarily follow the sequence of the questions and comments that we made, we will begin with the first one and the fourth one, the emphasis on the word hamakom, and why Yaakov institutes Ma'ariv right then, and then it will flow from there. Now we know the word hamakom, the term hamakom, is also the name of Hashem, although it is rarely used. Actually, the Shemoneh Tov, the Sefer Shemoneh Tov, tells us that nowhere in the written Torah is Hashem explicitly referred to as Hamakom. However, the Zohar brings down that in fact there is one place that Hashem is alluded to with the name of Hamakom, and from there we can understand the attribute of Hashem that we are speaking of, or what we are describing when we call Hashem Hamakom. If you turn to page 102, this is in the middle of the obviously very famous story of Akedas Yitzchak. At this point, Avraham, they've been traveling for 3 days. Avraham and Yitzchak and Eliezer and Yishmael are approaching from a distance Hara Moriah. And Pasuk Daled, Pasuk 4 says, Vayom Ashlishi, on the third day, Vayisa Avram es Einav, Vayar es Hamakom Merachok. And it was on the third day that Avram lifted his eyes and he saw the place from afar. Now the place, as we interpret it, means Har HaMoriah. He saw the place, the mountain upon which he was going to do the Akedah. Says the Zohar, no. Hamakom in that instance refers to Hashem. Why? Because the Zohar tells us that the term Hamakom refers to when we know Hashem fills the world, Hashem rules the world, but it's merachok, it's from afar. We don't feel the closeness. We have questions about what Hashem is doing at that time, what is going around us in the world at that time, or in our personal world at that time. When Hashem is acting from behind the cloud, so to speak, it's not clear to us Hashem's involvement. When we have faith and we know Hashem is running the world, but we can't feel the closeness. We can't understand what's happening. We don't see it. It makes no sense to us. That is why Hashem is referred to by Avram as Hamakom. Avram had perfect faith in Hashem, but it was distant from him. He had passed so many tests, and finally he had his son, and now Hashem is asking him to sacrifice his son. So he saw Hashem, but it was merachok, from afar, far away from him, obscured, hard to understand. Thus we see the characteristic of Hashem's name Hamakom is when things are not clear to us. We know Hashem is there, but we don't feel the closeness. That's why it said Hamakom Merachok, from far away. Says the Shemin HaTov, based on that, there are only two places that we regularly refer to Hashem as Hamakom. The first is in a house of mourning, at least for Ashkenazim. What do we say to the mourner? Hamakom yenachem eschem. May Hashem console you. But we use the term hamakom when referring to Hashem. Why is that? Because the person just lost someone dear to them. It is oftentimes hard to understand. They feel like Hashem is not close to them at that time. They can't understand why it happened. It's hard to see Hashem in that situation. We know He's there, but it's hard to make sense of it. Therefore, we say Hamakom. We use the name of Hashem that refers to our blind faith in knowing He's there, even if we can't see Him, even if He's hard to see. The other place, on Mondays and Thursdays, and I think it was on our Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah video, we spoke about this a little bit. We're going to just briefly go over it again for a different point. On Mondays and Thursdays, after laning, the Chazan says a series of Yehi Ratzons. And each one is, may it be the will of you, Hashem, in heaven, that you take care of the rabbis and our people, etc. All these different requests. But after the first four comes the fifth, which is very famous, Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasunim Batsara Uveshivya. Our brothers, the entire family of Israel who are in distress and captivity. Hamakom Yerachem Aleichem. May Hashem, using the term Makom, have mercy on them. Why Hamakom? Why do we use that term in this instance? Again, these are people who are in distress, people who are in captivity. They feel very far away from Hashem at that time. It's very hard to understand their situation. That's who we're praying for. We're praying for people who are in some way trapped or they are in terrible distress. We use the term Hamakom there because Hamakom represents that same attribute where it's hard to see Hashem, where He seems distant. We know He's running the world, but He seems very distant to us. So based on that, I wanted to suggest that we can now understand why Yaakov institutes Mariv exactly at that moment. As the second pasuk states, Vayifga b'makom. As we said, that it tells us that Yaakov instituted Ma'ariv at that time. Why? Because he was entering into a period of darkness and uncertainty when Hashem may have seemed very distant to him. So it is precisely at that moment that he calls out to Hashem in a prayer, Ma'ariv, that reflects darkness and uncertainty, which is why it's said at night. He needed to institute a tefillah at night. It is not only the literal night, it is the metaphoric night. When things are obscure, when things seem uncertain and unsure, that is when we needed that tefillah. And I want to suggest that's why it says, Vayifka b'makom. Ba, the base could mean in, or it can mean with. Vayifka b'makom means, and he davened with makom, with that attribute where Hashem seems far away to us, when things are not so clear to us. And that's why it says the term hamakom three times in that pasuk, to emphasize the fact that Yaakov needed to institute Ma'ariv at that moment because he was going into a very scary situation. He didn't know how long he was going to be gone. He knew he had to accomplish much, but it was going to be in a foreign land. It was going to be a period of darkness and nighttime for him, lack of clarity, where Hashem may seem very far away from him, especially in the land of Lavan. And therefore, he has to institute Ma'ariv at that moment. And therefore, I want to suggest is why it says, Vayifka b'makom. He davened with that attribute of Hashem. And he was afraid, and he did not feel confident that he could accomplish his mission, especially when he was leaving the pristine atmosphere of his father's home and Eretz Yisrael to go into the secular business world. So he composes Ma'ariv and goes to sleep. And what happens? What happens when he goes to sleep? When he awakens, he says, page 146, Pasuk 16, as soon as he wakes up, he declares something very curious. He says, Vayikatz Yaakov Mishnaso, page 146, Pasuk 16. Vayomer, Ochen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh, Anochi lo yadati. He says, aha! Hashem is even in this place, and I did not know. But I want to suggest, what is he saying? Achen yesh Hashem b'makom. Even when it's makom, even when it seems very far away, Hashem is still there. He's here. He's right here, right now, in this foreign place with me. I may have a lack of clarity, but now I realize Hashem is even in this place. He's close to me, and I did not know. Now Yaakov understands Hashem, hamakom, is near him, is with him all the time. So now he realizes he can be successful in building his family. Maybe he had an element of uncertainty up until that point, but now he sees he can do it. And where do we see an allusion for what I'm suggesting? That immediately thereafter he feels confident that in fact he will be able to build the family. So I want to suggest, if you turn to that next psukim later, page 146, Pasuk Yud Ches, we referenced it before because of the rock. What does it say? Vayashkem Yaakov baboker vayikaches ha'even asher samei roshosav vayasem osa matseva vayitzok shemen al rosha. Says the translation or the interpretation. Yaakov arose early in the morning and took the stone that he had placed around his head, now singular as we referenced before, and set it up as a pillar, a batseva, and he poured oil on its top. Now, Even and matseva are two words that often go together, but not in this context. Just so you know, a matseva can mean a single stone altar, And as a matter of fact, that was the type of altar and that was preferred by the Avos, but it actually later becomes forbidden in the Torah. We are not allowed to make a matzeva because that is what the idol worshippers used to serve their gods, and therefore the Mizbeach now had to become one of multiple stones, not a single stone anymore. However, matzeva is still in our lives, so to speak, because a matzeva is also a gravestone. That's what we call the gravestone, a matzeva. And interestingly, matzeva and even, a rock, are connected because, as I'm sure everybody knows, we have a custom of placing an even, a rock, on the matzeva, on the gravestone. Now, why is that? Why do we do that? So the answer is, we do not know why we do that. There are quite a number of answers proffered as to why it is. The one that I favor most, the one that I find to be it resonates with me the most, but also will help us in this situation, is the following explanation. The word even, stone, is Rashi Tevos. It's the initials, Aleph Beis Nun, for Av Ben Neched, father, son, grandson. Or Em Bas Nechta, mother, daughter, granddaughter. What we are doing when we place the rock on the matzeva is we are saying to the mace, to the person that lies there, your life is far from over. This is all one long chain, one long link. And I am putting that even on your matzeva because you are either my father or mother, my grandfather, grandmother, or I am the son. It is an unbroken link, an unbroken chain from Sinai till today. When we come to the matzeva, we say we understand it is now our responsibility to carry on that link, to carry on that line. Av Ben Neched, Em Bas Nechta. That is the purpose of putting the rock. And based on that, I can now suggest that that's what Yaakov was doing when he made the even into a matzeva. He shows that he now knows he is carrying on. He is to complete the mission that was begun by his grandfather Avram and his father Yitzchak. He understands that now he will in fact be the third of the Avos, the third of the patriarchs, and will fulfill the message that the mission that they had started. Which brings us to who was protecting Yaakov if the 12 rocks merged into one. And for that we will once again visit the Tefillah of Achenu. As I once heard explained by Rabbi Frand, this is closer in line to what we spoke of a few months ago on the video. If you'll recall, on Mondays and Thursdays, the Chazan, after Torah reading, says a series of Yehi Ratzons. They're all requests from Hashem, whether he should bring his Shechina towards us, to protect the Rabbanon, things of that nature. But then there's a fifth one. And even though it should start with Yehi Ratzon L'Fnei Avinu Shebashamayim like all the others, noticeably it does not. Instead, it very famously starts, Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasunim Basaro V'Shivya. Our brothers, entire house of Israel, who are in distress and captivity. When it comes to that tefillah, there's no Yehi Ratzon. You know why? Because when we're praying for things in general, we need to ask Hashem, may it be your will. But when we are coming as Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, our brothers, those that we are davening for, who are in a bad situation, we do not need to say Yehi Ratzon L'Fnei Avinu Shebashamayim. We do not need to request that it be God's will, because it is automatically God's will. When we are worrying about our fellow Jew, when we are davening to Hashem to relieve them from their distress, we don't need Yehi Ratzon. Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. We are being unified, and therefore automatically we have Hashem's will and Hashem's protection. And that is the lesson we must understand. First, that is exactly who was protecting Yaakov. You see, the stones all merged into one. Once the stones all merged into one as an act of unity, they no longer needed to protect Yaakov, because automatically Hashem came and he was protecting him right then and right there. When Hashem sees unity, we need no more than that. Hashem automatically comes to protect us. And that is the lesson we must understand. I recall last year, one of my trips to Israel, I was visiting a couple of yeshivas to scout them for my son Boaz, who is there this year. He chose Shalevim, but all the ones we went to see were very, very worthy yeshivas. And at one point I visited HaKotel, and I sat with the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Taragin, for a very long time. And he took me into the foyer of his office, and he showed me the following picture. They have it in their literature, a mini version. I'll show it to you. I don't know if the camera can see it, but it is a picture of 4 rabbis. You have the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you have Rav Soloveitchik, you have Rav Kook, and you have the Chazon Ish. And it says, Ezu Chacham, Halomed Mikol Adam. Who is a wise person? He who learns from everyone. His point was, well, first let me brag. He told me I'm the first person in history that he brought into his office that was able to name all 4 of the rabbis from their picture. Usually those that know Rav Soloveitchik's picture are not always familiar with the Chazon Ish, and those who know the Chazon Ish may not know Rav Soloveitchik, perhaps even Rav Kook, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, his point in that very beautiful, it's more than a picture, it takes up a huge part of his wall, is to say that each one had a philosophy that we can learn from. But I realized that that is a perfect depiction of Yaakov from this Parsha. Yaakov was like the Chazon Ish. Yaakov started out Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. He was a simple, wholesome Torah learner. He just sat and learned Torah all day long. That was the Chazon Ish, who was, in many respects, if not the founder of the yeshiva system in Eretz Yisrael, certainly had progressed it very far in his day. He was, of course, the Gadol Ador there, and his emphasis was on learning Torah. It said about the Chazon Ish, I can't tell you if it's true or not, I wasn't there, but it said that he would measure exactly how many steps were from his desk where he studied to his bed, and he would be able to learn with enough strength just to measure it. He would close his sefer and only have enough strength to make those few steps to his bed and then make it. They say that one time, some people say a few times, he actually collapsed before he made it to his bed. He had mismeasured, maybe he took in an extra Rashi or something, but nonetheless, he was all about Torah learning. Then there's Rav Kook. Rav Kook, of course, is famous for his love of the land, his love of Eretz Yisrael. And as we see, Yaakov is very sad to leave Eretz Yisrael in this Parsha. He has to go from Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim, he was a yeshiva bachar, and now he needs to leave his beloved Eretz Yisrael. And so he has the attribute of Rav Kook. And then, of course, Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav. So what was Yaakov doing now? He was entering the business world. He was Torah Umada now. Now he was not just somebody who was learning all day. He also needed to go into the secular world. He also needed to occupy his time doing business. And Rav Soloveitchik, of course, championed the idea of Torah Umada. And finally, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, as we had said before, when referencing that he told Rachel that he could be her father's equal in trickery, that ultimately he was hoping to influence Lavan and to be Makarev Lavan, just like the Lubavitcher Rebbe who emphasized Kiruv. Those are the 4 crucial aspects of a Jew, and we saw them all here in Yaakov. But it's hard for any one of us, other than perhaps Yaakov, to do all of those things, even though they are all correct. So what do we need? We need Achdus. We need unity. We need all of us coming together, each one of us doing our specific role, each role being equally important. Then we can merge into one, like that rock in the beginning. then we have the absolute protection of Hashem. Then we are called by the illustrious title, Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael. Good Shabbos.